and RNG is very clearly trying. Oh, is they're going to get the Yasuo for caps?
That's locked in.
Yeah.
He's been spamming this champion in solo queue.
Pobelter, I'm expecting to see something perhaps like an Azir. I think that can fit the build pretty well.
Oh,
It's
no, you're not.
Oh my god, a blind pick Yasuo from Pobelter. That was about the last thing I was expecting
Still
here.
available, and with the on ban, he just seems to be the go-to choice against the Sion here. Just gives him a little bit more threat against tanks.
Oh.
There it is again.
Now, Caps looks so good, so clean, so quick on the Yasuo's
It's a classic matchup. That's a classic matchup if he picks it.
Calm down, calm down. Let's go.
Kobe!
He's got it.
Come up, Kobe!
It is indeed going to be the Yasuo counter into the Gnar. We've seen it so many times.
So far in MSI 2018, Yasuo has been picked 4 times and banned 7 times in 24 total games as of the recording of this video, which equates to a 47% pick ban ratio. Now before MSI, so far in 2018, Yasuo has only been picked 3 times in a major region, once by Kuro in the LCK playoffs and then twice by Huni in the NALCS spring split. So why is a mid lane assassin all of a sudden being blind picked in pro play after seeing no direct buffs or nerfs in the recent patches? What is making Yasuo such a good pick in this meta right now? And that's what we're going to be breaking down in this video. So the first reason as to why we're seeing more Yasuo, and probably one of the bigger reasons, is because Yasuo's laning phase really isn't exploitable right now due to the resolve tree. You don't really have that great of an ability to punish Yasuo 1v1 in lane because of Bone Plating and Chrysalis along with Yasuo's passive. It's very hard for most mid lane champions to even poke him out in the laning phase or to really get any kind of priority in lane against Yasuo, and because of this, he can just very easily farm up in the laning phase, get to his 2-item spike, and then once he gets to that spike, he can really start to make an impact on the game. So number 2, the second reason to why Yasuo is being picked more is because there's a lot of really good champions in the meta for other roles that synergize great with Yasuo. In 3 out of the 4 games that Yasuo was picked, he was paired up with a Trundle, and with the Trundle pillar, it's just very easy for Yasuo to ult off of that. Trundle's pillar is a very long range ability, so it's just super easy, especially like once Trundle hits level 6, to just walk past mid lane, he throws the pillar out, Yasuo gets a free ultimate, and it's just really nice setup for the Yasuo. Braum was another pick that was played in 3 out of the 4 Yasuo games so far at MSI, and with your Braum ultimate, it's another tool that Yasuo can use to ult off of in a team fight. And then in the top lane right now, Sion is one of the most contested top lane picks, and when you pair Yasuo up with a Braum, a Trundle, and a Sion in one team comp, which is what we saw in one of the games at MSI, it just allows Yasuo to really succeed inside of team fights, and there's just so many different knockups that he can ult off of. The third reason to why we're seeing more Yasuo is because right now in the top lane and in the jungle in pro play, generally speaking, a tank is picked most of the time. We're seeing a lot of Cho'Gath right now in the top lane, a lot of Olaf in the jungle, and Yasuo is one of the best champions in the game at shredding tanks. Once you hit your 2-item spike on Yasuo, you're gonna reach 100% crit. You also have true damage from your Conqueror, and those are 2 of the best things in the game for shredding tanks. Crit and true damage just do a very good job at just melting through tanks. It really doesn't even matter if someone like Cho'Gath has 2 or 3 armor items in the mid to late game, because with Yasuo on his 2 to 3 items, he's always gonna be able to beat that Cho'Gath in the side lane, and he's also gonna do a very good job at chunking him out in team fights. Number 4 is that Yasuo just cannot be matched in the side lane once he reaches 2 to 3 items by really any champion in the top lane or in the mid lane for the pro meta right now. We're seeing a lot of tanks in the top lane, and Yasuo just destroys tanks in the side lane. In the mid lane, we're seeing a lot of Ryze, Taliyah, Karma, Zoe, and those champions just cannot match Yasuo in the side lane either once he hits his item spike. So just overall, if you can get ahead with Yasuo right now and you can put him in a side lane, then he's gonna draw a lot of pressure, and you're gonna have to send at least 2 members into that side lane to deal with the Yasuo if he does get ahead. So for number 5 here, usually mid lane AD assassins aren't picked a ton in pro play because they generally don't fit into team comps very well, just because if you got an AD top laner and you've also obviously got your AD carry, then a lot of the time you are going to have an AD heavy composition. But there's a few reasons as to why Yasuo mid lane, even though he's an AD pick, can work right now in this meta. Both Swain and Vladimir are very strong picks in the top lane. They've been seeing picks and bans so far at MSI, so if you can secure yourself a Swain or a Vladimir for your top lane, then it really does free up that Yasuo pick in the mid lane, and it does give your team a good amount of mixed damage. And then going back to this Trundle pick in the jungle, it's just a really good enabler for the Yasuo mid lane pick, because even if your team comp is a little bit AD heavy, Yasuo was picked with a Sion top lane and a Trundle in the jungle, so there's not very much AP in that composition, but because of the Trundle ultimate, it does allow you to get away with running more of a heavy AD composition. If the enemy team does have one tank champion and they're stacking armor, as long as the Trundle can ult that tank in a team fight, then he's really not going to be very tanky. And if he's the only champion on the enemy team actually building a lot of armor, then having full AD just doesn't really matter too much in that situation. Now one might ask, why is Yasuo the AD assassin that is seeing picks and bans at MSI, and why not something like Talon or Zed? So there's a few different reasons for this. The first thing, and we've already kind of covered this in the video, is that he does a really good job at shredding tanks. You're not going to get that out of your Talon or out of your Zed. And also, if you play something like Talon or Zed, you don't really have the best ability to match a tank in a side lane. A lot of the time, you're going to be building lethality on your Talon or your Zed. You're not going to be building crit. You're not going to have any true damage. So your ability to actually deal with a tank in a side lane and your ability to chunk them out in team fights is a lot weaker than Yasuo. Yasuo is also just generally a better teamfight champion than someone like Talon or Zed. Of course, if you can get ahead on Talon or Zed, then their one-shot potential in a teamfight or just throughout the game is usually a lot better than Yasuo, but Yasuo's ability to provide more in a mid to late game teamfight is better than someone like Talon or Zed. He just does provide a lot more consistent damage in his kit. His wind wall is one of the strongest abilities and one of the strongest teamfight abilities in the game if used correctly, so Yasuo is just a lot better inside of teamfights a lot of the time than most of the other assassins. Yasuo is also an assassin who's kind of unique in the sense that even if you do fall behind in the early game, you always do have the potential to come back with this champion. If you're playing someone like Zed or Talon, if you fall behind in the early game, if you can't really get a snowball going, then there's not really any point in the game, or there's not really any power spike that you're looking to hit to where you're really going to come online and start doing a lot of damage. But with Yasuo, even if you don't have the best laning phase, you can always look to play for that 2 to 3 item spike on Yasuo. Once you get Infinity Edge and Phantom Dancer, even if you end up going like 0-5 in the laning phase, even if you're feeding, you're always going to have the potential to come back, just because Yasuo's 2 item spike is one of the best for any champions in the game. I'm sure you've had those Yasuo players in solo queue to where they just end up feeding in the laning phase, they go 0-5, but once they do end up reaching their 2 items, it seems like it doesn't even matter how well you've played against him in the laning phase, even though you've beat him in the early game. If the game reaches mid to late game, it just does not matter how bad Yasuo plays in the early game, because he's always going to be able to do a lot of damage once he does get his items. And then lastly, Zed and Talon don't have the best synergy with Conquer. They're really not going to be running that, so their ability to match tanks in the side lane is definitely not as good as Yasuo's. Because Yasuo is crit and true damage, he can just very easily match up in a side lane against those tanks. But with your Zed, even if you do get ahead with a lethality assassin, if the enemy team does have that Cho'Gath that's stacking armor, you're really only going to be able to tickle that champion in the side lane, because lethality is not a very good build against armor stacking champions. So Cho'Gath can just sit in the side lane and really not have to worry too much about any kill pressure, and because of that, Yasuo is just a much better pick, because if you get ahead and you put Yasuo into the side lane, then he's just going to do a much better job than any other AD assassin. So that is going to be all for this video, guys. Those were the 5 reasons as to why I think Yasuo has been picked a lot more in pro play at MSI 2018. So if you guys do have any other ideas as to why you think Yasuo has been seeing a lot more play, then be sure to let me know down in the comments below. But with that being said, guys, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.